you are going live.
Okay, great.
Welcome to Chrissy Comments Conversation. And I am your host, Chrissy. And I know I normally don't do additional interview, but this is a special one. So happy Thursday evening to everyone. And as always, how I like to get started, I like to tell everyone that I want to salute everyone that is in the front lines of the pandemic, because even though they told us to take our masks off, people are still suffering and still dying every day. So this will
Every day.
eventually become a silent killer. But be aware,
Yeah.
be on your toes, and salute to those that are at the forefront of this pandemic that we're in right now. So without further ado, welcome to Chrissy Comments Conversation. How are you guys?
I'm doing pretty good. Pretty good. Long time.
Good, good. Yes, I know, I
Yeah.
know. Yes, please tell people who you are.
Right. So, my name is Gareth Bryant, and I've had the pleasure of knowing Chrissy since our high school days at Benjamin Banneker in
Yes,
Brooklyn, New
yes.
York. Good
Shout out
people.
to
So
Benjamin Banneker. You see what you've
that's right.
produced?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Yeah, so
Yeah.
I'm currently I'm a chaplain, I'm a counselor, I'm a therapist. I work in healthcare and I also work in juvenile justice. Very challenging work, rewarding but challenging.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Wow. Wow. What led you to go into that field after high school?
Well, it took a long time for me to pursue chaplaincy. I didn't pursue chaplaincy until 2014.
Okay.
So I've been a chaplain since 2014. My first chaplaincy supervisor, he was trying to get me to become a chaplain for years, and I kept dodging it. But then in 2014, I said to myself, you know what? Let me just give this a try. And to be honest, it ended up being the most intelligent professional experience that I've ever had. It was the most intelligent professional decision I ever made because every time I go to work, Allah empowers me to make the world better through making people better. Every time I go to work, I make at least one person's life better.
That
So that's
sounds
why I
amazing.
continue to do what I do.
So explain to the viewers what a chaplain is for some people that may not know.
Right. So chaplaincy, the way I studied it and the way most people on a professional level study chaplaincy, it's under what's known as CPE, clinical pastoral education. And the bread and butter of chaplaincy is 90% empathy, concern, compassion for others, and 10% listening skills. And within that, you have what's known as the 4 E's of CPE. Um, the first E is engagement, where you actually introducing yourself to a person or introducing yourself as a person who can provide tools to help a person. Then you have what's known as exploration, meaning you're digging deep into the dark spaces and places of a person, or
Mm,
you're unearthing the things that trigger people. Then you have what's known as evocation, meaning this means that you're connecting a person to who or what they deem as holy and sacred. This doesn't have anything necessarily to do with anything religious, even though it often does have a religio context. It doesn't exclusively have a religio context. It just means to connect them with something that they hold dear, that they
okay.
view as bigger than themselves, greater than
Bigger than
themselves.
themselves. Exactly.
Right. And then the fourth E is empowerment, meaning you teach people the ways to promote positive decision making for themselves. So those are the 4 C's of CPE, and that's the bread and butter of what clinical pastoral education chaplaincy is based upon.
Wow. I mean, was this something you decided to go into? Because I've never even heard of such a career path. I mean, there's so many different things out there, but this is not something that I'm familiar with. So how did you
A lot of
go into
people
this?
out, especially a lot of people outside of the healthcare field,
Okay.
barely know anything about chaplaincy. And even within the healthcare field, you'd be surprised how many people have no idea what a chaplain is. Like I work with people at the hospital where I work at in New York City, in the Northwell system, Northwell Lenox Hill on the Upper East Side in Manhattan. And you'd be surprised how many of my coworkers have never met a chaplain before prior to me.
Mm, Yeah,
And
I
I'm talking about
don't
people who
recall
are, I'm
ever.
talking about people who are hospital administrators, people who are directors of medical departments, clinical departments. They've never even heard of the field pastoral care or chaplaincy.
Now I worked at Johns Hopkins University about maybe 10 years ago.
Okay.
And I've seen the area, but not knowing what it entailed or the background or
Yeah,
the education
that's what
that you
pastoral care
need.
is.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Pastoral care is a euphemism for chaplaincy.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
we're gonna dig a little deeper to go with that, because tonight our topic is, how do we pray? How do others pray? And the reason being is because you've just finished observing Ramadan.
Right,
And I asked my uncle earlier to explain a little bit to me. He doesn't, he studies, but he's not within the faith.
right,
And
right.
he gave me the correct name for it, and I told him my pronunciation is going to be so jacked up, and I don't want to be disrespectful, so I'm going to stick with Ramadan.
Right. Yeah, so Ramadan is actually 1 month, is the ninth month on the Islamic calendar. And this is classified as the month of fasting. So the term fasting in the Arabic language is a term known as as-siyam, fasting. And the etymology or the word origin of the word siyam means self-discipline or self-control.
Okay.
So the whole purpose of the month of Ramadan is to rewire a person and re-amalgamate and to how should I say, reformat a person or reboot a person's self-control,
Okay.
to redirect a person towards the path of self-control.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
See, I think it's important for us and the society that we're living in today, for us to understand one another more in what we believe, follow, all of that. So
Just in terms of
often,
basic respect.
yes, that's all it really is. Respecting one another's faith, religion, lifestyle, all the way around.
Boundaries. Right.
That's it. And I wanted to have this conversation. And I remember reaching out, telling you that I wanted to wait until you finish observing Ramadan,
Right.
because I respect your belief. And that it was important that we came on this evening to explain to others, because right now we live in a very polarization of different people's backgrounds, where if you're Democrat or Republican, it's already a problem, let alone if you're Christian and Muslim,
Or
So,
any religious or spiritual lifestyle. Yeah.
anything right now,
And
everything is like on the
ironically,
table.
if we would have done this interview during Ramadan, it actually ironically would have been easier for me.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because I would have been completely immersed in the subject matter. Whereas now, since Ramadan is over, I'm now abstract from the experience. So if I
Okay.
was still in the experience, I would have been able to provide richer context just from my personal experience, because I was in the present moment
In the
living the
moment.
experience. Right.
Okay. And I had another friend of mine that said, well, why didn't you interview him during this time? I mean, I would think it would have been more important. I said, well, I was thinking to respect this time for him. So I was waiting, again, not educated in understanding what Ramadan really is. I thought that I needed to wait until it was over.
Right.
So I wanted to explain your background. Is this your faith and your belief? Is this what you were born into?
No, I'm what someone would classify as a Muslim revert, meaning someone who accepted al-Islam and someone who was not Muslim by birth or raised Muslim.
Okay, what is that term again?
It would Muslim revert, because Islamically we believe that every human being is born with a natural instinct to worship the one who created them, right?
Okay.
And if a person is not raised as a Muslim and then they end up becoming Muslim, it's classified as a return to that natural instinct. That's why people who become Muslim are referred to commonly as Muslim reverts. because it's a return to a natural instinct.
Okay. Wow. And was this a path that you were put on as a child or as an adult?
Well, I became Muslim in high school, so
I
I don't.
thought so. I
Yeah,
remember,
yeah, yeah,
but
yeah,
others
yeah,
don't know, so that's why I brought that
yeah,
out.
yeah. So I ended up making the decision to become Muslim in ninth grade in high school when we were at Banneker. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. I can remember I was explaining to someone you were very quiet to yourself, nice guy, from what I remember.
Right. Well,
um,
high school for anyone who experiences high school, a very tumultuous time. So there was a lot of different elements, like to me, like you had some people who viewed me as like the quiet guy, the shy guy, and then you had other people who viewed me as the knucklehead, and so but there was a lot of different dimensions of me, and
uh-huh.
depending on who you were, I chose to disclose certain things to some and certain things to others. So people like you guys only saw one dimension, which was kind of
Okay.
like the quiet, isolated, shy guy type of
Yeah,
person,
yeah.
whereas other people saw more of like a live wire version of myself.
Well, whichever version you were back then, it created a very, very intelligent man now, that seems to be doing great, great, great things in the seems to be mental health almost field. Is that
No, no,
connected to mental
definitely,
health?
directly. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So,
And in fact, I was actually directly involved in mental health even before I started chaplaincy. Like, for example, I've been a suicide awareness prevention advocate since 2011.
wow.
And
See,
and in fact,
so many layers.
yeah, and in fact, I'm actually till this day, I'm actually the only Muslim who's actually participated in the opening ceremonies of the annual AFSP Out of the Darkness Overnight Suicide Walk, which is annually sponsored by the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention.
Wow. Do you hear this mental health awareness, people, this month? That is very important because we are still in mental health awareness month.
Yeah,
And um, that topic has not changed on Chrissy Commons
yeah.
Conversation. You're always
I mean, I've
pushing
personally,
knowledge
like
of
through
mental
Allah's
health.
mercy, I've personally been able to prevent people from attempting or committing suicide through every communication modality you can think of, even in terms of actually primarily physically restraining people and preventing them from attempting suicide. Like one person I knew from college, I was at their home and they literally threatened to kill themselves in front of me. They literally said, "I'm going to pop pills until I drop dead."
Oh my God.
Literally one of the most scariest moments of my life.
I can imagine
Literally one of the
so.
scariest moments of my life. And I had to literally physically prevent that person from attempting suicide.
Well, definitely thank you for that's frontline work right there. That's essential. Um, so for you to be a part of people's lives in such a way that you're saving lives, that is major. I want to swing back around to talking about your belief and how you've grown up. What can you say are some of the differences? Because myself, I've grown up in a predominantly Christian, structured home, where we believed in Jesus and God, and all of the typical things that most people, um, would say is normal. I don't want to say it's normal because
I
why
know
would
what you
that be
mean.
normal?
I
You,
know what you mean. What
you know what I mean?
basically not necessarily quote unquote normal, but what a person is typically used to.
That's right.
We'll put it that way. I can say for myself, in terms of just actual belief, is that in terms of the issue of Jesus specifically, right? So
Mhm.
Muslims, we believe that Jesus is the Christ. That's an actual staple Islamic belief. But we don't believe that Jesus possesses divinity. That's the
Okay.
issue. We believe that Jesus is the Christ. We believe that the miracles he was able to heal through his hands. And in fact, in the Arabic language, he's actually called Al-Masih, which means one who heals by hand. So we believe that he cured the blind, cured the deaf, cured the mute, raised the dead. We believe all of those things. We believe that he fed the multitude of people, but we don't ascribe what is known as al-uluhiyya, divinity, to Jesus.
Okay.
Like in other words, we don't say that he's the son of Allah, and we don't say that he is Allah.
Okay. So that is the parallel. That's the differences. That's where it's
the premier difference between Muslims and those who ascribe to the Judeo-Christian narrative, right?
Yeah. Which that's a whole nother subject matter.
That's a whole nother podcast by itself.
Yes, that's another day. As you can see, I'm very, very open-minded, and I have been raised in to learn many things, to understand that the Quran is similar to what we're taught in the Bible, and a lot of people don't get that because they automatically shut down anything that is not what they are used to. So
or doesn't directly complement or co-sign their narrative.
Right. So if you're raised, I mean, that it's the same almost when it comes to it's the same when it comes to racism. If you're taught that something that's different from you is
inferior or superior, when someone brings something different to clarify or to correct it, you shun it. You create resistance.
Right. That's right. Instead of trying to understand it and accept it as nothing different about it, it's just not what you believe or understand. That's all.
Right. And Islamically, we believe that even if someone is wrong, we still have an opportunity and an obligation to learn from a person. Because realistically, you can learn from a person even if they're wrong.
And they're wrong. That's right.
Yeah. I mean, even if they're wrong or even when they're wrong. Yeah, you can still learn from a person.
That's how we as humans learn in life. You learn from the things you do wrong. A child learns that the water is hot because they touched it,
and they got scolded. Right.
Right. They have to experience it in order to learn from it. So I definitely agree with that. And as going into your adulthood and understanding and diving deeper into Islam, what did you find was some of the most difficult things for you, transitioning from high school into adulthood and everything?
Just self-discipline. That's always been the hallmark. Al-Islam always emphasizes self-discipline at all times, because it's not about how people perceive you. It's about your willingness to always improve, because Al-Islam is 24/7 self-improvement. So in other words, as a Muslim, every time I look into the mirror, I have to make a decision whether I'm going to be a better Muslim today than I was yesterday, and whether I'm going to be a better Muslim tomorrow than I am today. So that's an everyday endeavor that any and every Muslim has to self-embark upon. They have to embark upon that themselves.
Let me ask, why do you think that everyone lumps all the different types of Muslims, because it's different types? They lump them all together.
There's certain people who ascribe to various how should I say, religio-sectarian persuasions. And then you have persons like myself who are non-sectarian, meaning we don't subscribe to any religio-sectarian persuasions. Okay. So you have persons like me, and then you have other Muslims who actually subscribe to various religio-sectarian persuasions. The main reason how and why all of us are clumped into the same category is mainly because of Islamophobia. Because in the eyes of Islamophobes and in the eyes of Islamophobia, they don't care whether you're sectarian or non-sectarian. If you're Muslim, they're going to discriminate against you regardless. They don't care what your religio views are. They don't care the depths or the of your religious understanding, the heights or the highs or the lows of your religious understanding. They don't care about the extent or lack thereof of your individualistic religious observance. They don't care about any of those things, right? And I mean, even among Muslims, there are Muslims who don't care about those things, because I tell people all the time, you don't have to be non-Muslim to be an Islamophobe. So there's actually definitely Muslims who are Islamophobes based on the choices that they choose in life and the decisions that they make and all of those type of things, right? So when it comes to things like that, that's how and why the vast majority of Muslims are clumped into one or more categories to pigeonhole us or to box us, and as opposed to recognizing and accepting the reality that just like there's different people, there's different Muslims that have different types of expressions, for better or for worse, for right or wrong, and that we're just individualized persons, just like people of any other religio faith group.
That's right.
Yeah, exactly.
That's very interesting, because like you said, the phobia, which is often fueled by social media, news, misinformed or miseducation.
Most importantly, apathy, carelessness.
Yes.
Like inhumanity. Because like I tell people all the time, apathy is worse than ignorance. Not caring is worse than not knowing. You'll have a person, they won't know anything about you, and they won't care to know anything about you. The only thing that matters to them is that they view you as opposition.
I consider people like that lost. If you have no empathy, you don't care, then you're a dead vessel.
You're a very destructive person.
Yes.
Because people who are apathetic, they're liable to disrespect a human being in
they have logic.
The most inhumane ways.
Yeah, people that have empathy have logic. They do things, they think it through.
Right. Whereas people who are apathetic, people who are apaths, they don't use reason or intelligence in any of their decision making. And this is actually how and why Allah says in the Quran, chapter 5, verse 8, Allah says, and never let your hatred against any people prevent you from behaving justly. Now, from that verse, there's several things that are taught from this verse that can be learned from. Number one is that even if you hate someone, you still have to give them the rights that Allah has given them, which are human rights. That's number one. And then number two, knowing that one must compel themselves and allow themselves to challenge themselves, like, wait a minute, regardless of me hating this person, if I have to respect them anyway, how and why do I even hate this person?
Right.
And then once you introspect that reality, you start to recognize and accept and realize that 9 times out of 10, the reasoning or the reasons how and why you hate a person is 100% invalid.
That's right. I mean, that is the same thing that we grow up believing in Christianity. We are not to judge one another. You should not judge. Who are you to judge your brother and sister on anything? We are not the high.
Well, since you mentioned judgment, right? There's a difference between judgment and judgmentalism. I'll explain what I mean. I've coined 4 C's of judgment. There's 4 C's of judgment: critique, criticism, correction, condemnation. Now, if/when anyone uses the 4 C's of judgment upon anyone as well as themselves, then that's judgment. Because once you use the 4 C's of judgment upon yourself as just as though you would others, you recognize and accept the reality that you're just as imperfect as anyone else. However, if you only use the 4 C's of judgment and impose it upon others without imposing it upon yourself, then that's judgmentalism. Because then you feel that you're perfect.
That you're perfect.
Right. And in all reality, Islamically, we recognize and accept the reality that only Allah has the entitlement, the justification to be judgmental. Because only Allah is perfect, meaning only Allah is sinless and flawless. And this is actually why one of the names of Allah is Al-Muhsin, the perfect. And this is why one of the names of Allah is Al-Hakam, the justifiably judgmental. So only Allah has
I want to try to pronounce that. Say that again.
Which
How,
what the
Allah,
names
yes,
the names in Arabic?
yes.
Okay, so the word al-Muhsin means the perfect.
Okay, the perfect.
And the name al-Hakam means the justifiably judgmental, meaning only Allah has the justification, the entitlement to impose critique, criticism, correction, condemnation upon those that exist. Because he alone is perfect. He alone is sinless. He alone is flawless. So with the exception of Allah, anyone or anything else that exists doesn't have the
Doesn't
entitlement
have
or
that.
justification to be judgmental because we're imperfect by our nature.
Now, I don't know how anybody can disagree with that. I mean, it's the same thing when we say God, which, people don't understand. All it is wordplay, in my opinion.
I mean, yes. I mean, and also things get lost in translation with semantics and certain things, certain words in certain languages are not translatable.
Right.
It's just not.
We'll never really know what they really mean.
It's not that. It's just that there's no really, well, for example, right, the name Allah, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's really no word in English that can really do justice to what Allah actually means. But you would just simply have to explain what Allah means. Like there's no word in the English language that you can actually use that's suitable as a parallel to the word Allah.
I mean,
because even if you use the word
English
God,
language
right?
itself is
Just English by itself.
It's a mess.
Right. Yeah, because even English itself is still an infantile language. Like, for example, the human documentation of the Quran is literally 4 centuries older than the English language as we know it. The English language as we know it is barely 1,000 years old.
New. Yeah, it's new.
Yeah, it's still an infantile language.
Yes.
Right.
And it has some of the worst wording and meanings of words that I've ever seen in this language.
And historically, English historically is a very warlike, hostile, conquering, bloodthirsty language in many ways.
I could agree with you on that.
but because it's literally a language among various other languages. English specifically, it's a language that literally evolved out of conquest. It's a language that literally evolved out of theft, rape, and murder. So by virtue of that, that's another whole that's a whole nother conversation. Yeah.
So knowing these things, I have a couple other questions. So do you know the Quran completely?
No, I haven't memorized it. I've read it cover to cover countless times, and my understanding of the Quran is more pristine the more that I study it, the more that I read it. But I haven't committed myself to the memory of the Quran. I'm very familiar with the textual know-how, the information, that just by virtue of my literacy and my studies of it.
Because I do know some people that are born in this belief, children often can remember the Quran.
I mean, they go to specific schools where the memorization of the Quran is taught. And even people who some of them, they're able to get to that level of scholarship where they've memorized the entirety of the Quran.
I remember
for some people it's easy, for some people it's difficult. It really depends on the aptitude that Allah gives a person in terms of their ability to learn things and their own personal diligence in terms of learning it. Because you have people who are in their 80s who've memorized the Quran. You have people under 80s who memorize the Quran. All ages in between.
Okay. Now, do you pray often? Like, how many times a day do you do your prayer?
Well, for us, prayer is of 2 dimensions. There's a primal dimension, and it's all primal. But what I mean is that there is a mechanical dimension to prayer, and there's a verbal dimension to prayer. Now, in terms of the verbal dimension, there's no like time limit or space or place limit in terms of the prayer. In terms of the mechanical prayer, which most people are familiar with in terms of the 5 daily prayers, these are at fixed stated times, which fluctuate based on the length of certain time duration throughout the time of the year.
Okay.
Right? So the mechanical prayer is only to be made at specific times of a day, whereas verbal prayers can literally be uttered at any time and as many times throughout a day.
Well, I know I often will be at my desk praying in my own head.
Right, exactly. Right. And then also we have standardized prayers, verbal prayers based on revelatory text. And then we also have the allowability to verbally pray freestyle. Like if you're just thinking about something or a dilemma, you would verbally pray, you would ask Allah for direction or guidance through a situation, through a dilemma, in terms of helping to reinforce your integrity, your principle, or to help you make a positive decision, or to help you to not make a negative decision, those type of things. So those would be classified as like freestyle prayers. And then you have standardized verbal prayers that are based on actual Islamic text, those type of things.
And I find the prayers and hearing them, I remember watching a documentary, Morgan Freeman has, I think it's on Discovery, where hearing the prayer at different times throughout the day was just, it was like music. It, you know, it was so in tune. It was beautiful to me. It was artistry. And I wanted to know from you, is it hard to get the dialogue, the pronunciations, and all of that correct? Was that? Well,
I mean, fortunately, I've always been good at language learning. So
okay.
like you know what I'm saying? So I have a high aptitude in terms of like my linguistic intelligence, my literary intelligence. So fortunately, it's always been easy for me to learn languages if I study them.
Okay.
How many languages do you speak? Well, I only speak English and Arabic, but obviously, like through high school, we study Spanish.
You speak Arabic. I mean, that's major.
Arabic is actually the easiest language I've ever studied in my life, honestly.
What?
Yeah, the most difficult language, the most complex language I've ever studied in my life, other than English, is actually Mandarin, which is the official language of China, and that's only because of the writing character system that makes Mandarin very complex and complicated.
That's interesting.
So writing in Chinese is very complex and complicated.
A lot of people don't know my daughter's name. I found out her name is Ara, and I found out in looking online that that's Arabic. It's more in the Arabic language.
Okay. So,
yeah. A lot of people don't know it, and it means agriculture. Something about agriculture, and I thought that was just like, well, who knew?
Yeah.
And that's about the easiest thing that I can pronounce in Arabic is her name. I have really, really enjoyed learning about, your belief. And I think it's important that we have more conversations such as these to understand one another, to have that general respect for each other, because we're living in such a time where respect for each other is just out the window.
It's almost non-existent.
Exactly.
Yeah. And realistically, if you don't respect someone, you'll never humble yourself to learn anything from them, because there's an Islamic principle which states truth is truth regardless of whom or where it comes from, which goes back to what I mentioned.
Can you say that?
Truth is truth. Well, I don't know. I prize it in Arabic, but I know it.
I was trying
from the translation. So that if you never recognize and accept the reality of that, then you'll never be able to humble yourself and learn something from someone. Because again, like I mentioned prior, even if someone is wrong, you're supposed to allow yourself to learn something from that person.
Yeah. I agree.
Because I tell people all the time, there's two differences between the knowledgeable person and the ignorant person. One, a knowledgeable person is always willing to recognize and accept the reality that they don't know everything. An ignorant person feels that they know everything. Right. 2, a knowledgeable person is always willing to recognize and accept the reality that they can learn something from anyone, regardless of whether they're right or wrong. An ignorant person feels that they're the only one who can teach someone something.
Okay. Well, I have, like I said, really enjoyed this evening's discussion, and I want to continue our discussion further and welcome you back on the show.
I'm more than willing to continue it anytime you're ready. I'm ready. Just let me know.
And you have your own podcast. Please put that out there and let people know about that.
Yeah, I have a podcast called Gareth Bryant's Perceptions. It's on Anchor, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts. It's exclusively based upon my work as a chaplain in terms of me engaging people with my skills through chaplaincy, counseling, and therapy.
So please, everybody, make sure that you look him up on anchor.fm and follow this at Chrissy Comics, as well as on anchor.fm /Chrissy Comics. Thank you so much for your time. As I hear the prayers going in the background.
Yeah.
Have a wonderful evening. And
you
please
as well.
remember to like, comment, and share. Thank you so much. And
Thank
have
you.
a great evening, Garth.
You as well. Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.